In the second half of the 18th century, an increasing interest in individual consciousness revealed itself in fiction. It was marked by a taste for the strange and the mysterious, by an impulse for freedom and escape from the ugly world, and by the fear of the triumph of evil and chaos over good and order. The interest in this kind of novel, called Gothic novel, was huge and common to all social classes, also thanks to circulating libraries. Today's ghost and horror novels and films, which are so popular, are a direct descendant of the 18th century Gothic novel. The adjective Gothic was first applied to architecture long before it connotated literature. The writer Horace Walpole was the first to establish a link between the two. His obsession with his beloved miniature castle at Strawberry Hill was the inspiration for The Castle of Otranto, 1764, and its subtitle, A Gothic Story, marks the first time that the term was used in a literary context. Features of the Gothic novel. Gothic novels intended to arouse fear in the reader with the threat of realizing all the potentialities the mind beyond reason. The nature of this fear seemed to reflect the specific historical moment, characterized by increasing disillusionment with Enlightenment rationality and by the bloody revolutions in America and France. The setting of Gothic novels was influenced by the concept of the sublime. It includes ancient settings like isolated castles, mysterious abbeys and convents with hidden passages and dungeons. The most important events take place during the night, because darkness is a powerful element used to create an atmosphere of gloom, oppression, and mystery. All the characters moving in such settings perceive the world around them as hostile. The Gothic hero is usually isolated either voluntarily or involuntarily, and the heroine is both afflicted with unreal terrors and persecuted by a villain, who is the embodiment of evil. The wanderer or outcast of several Gothic tales is the symbol of isolation, as he wanders the earth is in perpetual exile, usually as a form of divine punishment. The plots are often complicated by embedded narratives and supernatural beings like monsters, vampires, ghosts, and witches, which increase the suspense and mystery. The first novel of this kind, The Castle of Otranto, was followed by The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, The Monk by Matthew Gregory Lewis, and Frankestein by Mary Shelley. Dracula, 1897. Bram Stoker came across the name Dracula in a book entitled An Account of the Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia, which reports the existence of Vlad the Impaler in the 15th century. A footnote of the book states that Dracula in the Wallachian language means devil. Stoker changed the name into Count Dracula and turned the character into a vampire, a creature he had read about in folklore and legends. Dracula is told through journals and fragments of letters. It can be divided into 4 parts. The first describes Jonathan Harker's business trip to Count Dracula's castle, where he meets 3 powerful supernatural creatures who are female vampires. In part 2, Dracula travels to England, where he seduces and destroys an innocent English girl, Lucy Wenstrom. In the third part, a number of characters, among whom Dr. Abraham Van Helsing and Art, join together to fight Dracula and to track him to his castle. In the fourth part, he chases unsuccessful and ends in the destruction of Dracula within his castle. The novel maintains all the characteristics of the horror Gothic genre, but it also deals with the themes of fear of female sexuality, death, creation, and overcoming the boundaries between life and death. In addition, the vampire is presented as an outcast, a subject of pity who, however, must be destroyed. Dracula represents a sort of modern Gothic novel, but let's see the origin of the Gothic novel. Mary Shelley was born in 1797 the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, a feminist philosopher and novelist, and William Godwin, an anarchist and philosopher. Both her parents had been heavily influenced by the ideas of the French Revolution and were part of a more radical group, which included other important men of letters of the time, such as William Blake. 10 days after Mary's birth, her mother died, and 4 years later, her father married Mary Jane Claremont, and she and one of their daughters, Claire, were to be the cause of Mary Shelley's suffering and troubles for many years of her life. If Mary's emotional life was troubled, intellectual stimulus was not too wanting. In fact, Godwin's house was visited by some of the most famous writers of the day, like the romantic poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Percy B. Shelley. The philosopher welcomed Shelley heartily, and the poet was immediately attracted by the young, beautiful, intellectual Mary Godwin. In July 1814, the couple fled to France, and later Shelley decided to rent a country house on the banks of the Lake Geneva, near Byron's friendly Villa Diodati. It was that the writing of Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus took place. The initial inspiration of this novel burst into Mary's consciousness as a waking dream or nightmare, as a result of the intellectual simulation of Shelley and the romantic poet George Gordon Byron, together with her own deep anxieties and uncertainties. In 1816, Mary Shelley began to write Frankenstein, which was published anonymously in 1818. In 1822, the Shelleys moved to Lerici, where one day Percy set sail in a storm and was found drowned 10 days later. Mary returned to England in 1823, where she continued to publish and write. She died in 1851. Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. The plot of the novel is very simple. Victor Frankenstein, a Swiss scientist, managed to create a human being by joining parts selected from corpses. Despite careful preparation, the result of the experiment is ugly and revolting. The monster becomes murderer, and in the end, he destroys its creator. The story is not told chronologically and is introduced to us through a series of letters written by Walton, a young explorer on a voyage of expedition to the North Pole, to his sister Margaret Walton Seville. The events of the story happen all over Europe, from Geneva to the Alps, to France, England, and Scotland, as well as the university at Ingolstadt. The most important setting is the North Pole, where Walton and his shipmates are stuck by the ice and where Frankenstein is found following his creation. This setting is used to show these two characters' state of mind as being depressed, empty, and lonely. Furthermore, the creation's birthplace is next to Frankenstein University. Thus, this foreshadows the fact that Victor's creation has also the mind of a scholar. The Double. The three most important characters of the novel are all linked to the theme of the double. Walton is the double of Frankenstein, since he manifests the same ambition, the wish to overcome human limits, Prometheus meets. He is traveling towards the unknown, and the same wish for loneliness and pride of being different. Frankenstein and his creator are complementary. They both suffer from a sense of alienation and isolation. Both begin with a desire to good, but become obsessed with hate and revenge. The creator stands for the scientist's negative self. Frankenstein refers to him as a miserable monster, the wretch, a devil, fine, monstrous image, detested form. Neutral terms like creature or being are very rare. One sure sign of the double is the creator's hunting presence. Even if Frankenstein initially flees from his creators, and even if the direct confrontation are few, the monster is nevertheless constantly present in his life. Frankenstein's rejection of his creator is crucial, and this makes the monster an outcast, a murderer, and a rebel against society. In the introduction to the novel, Mary Shelley gives her own account of Frankenstein's origin. It seems that a number of things, like the reading of ghost stories, speculation about the reanimation of corpses, or the creation of life, our personal anxieties and the memories of a sense of loss at the death of her own mother came together at the point in her life, creating the waking dream or nightmare that so terrified her. Mary Shelley dedicated Frankenstein to Godwin, her father, and used many of the ideas held by her parents, including social justice and education. She clearly sympathizes with the monster, but is afraid of the consequences of his actions. In this, there is tension between fear of revolution and interest in the revolutionary ideas, two attitudes which were characteristic of English intellectuals in the years between 1789 and 1832. Even the influence of Percy B. Shelley was important. He and Mary were interested in science, and particularly chemistry, so that by the time she wrote Frankenstein, she was aware of the latest scientific theories and experiments in the fields of chemistry, evolutionism, and electricity. These sources provided contrasting scientific attitudes important to Mary Shelley's conception of science in Frankenstein, whose protagonist is the first embodiment of the theme of science and its responsibility to mankind. In fact, Frankenstein tries to create a human being through the use of electricity and chemistry without respecting the rules of nature as far as creation and life are concerned. The monster can be considered Rousseau's natural man, that is, a man in a primitive state, not influenced by civilization. He, however, rapidly discovers the limitation both of the state of nature and of civilization. The influence of the philosopher Locke can be seen in the description of the monster's self-awareness and his education by experience. The ghost stories read at Villa Diodata with Lord Byron provided an immediate stimulus, even if Frankenstein differs from the Gothic tradition, since it is not set in a dark castle and does not deal with supernatural events. Another important influence was the work of the Romantic poets in general. The most meaningful element Mary Shelley derived from Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is the fact that both Coleridge's ballad and Shelley's novels are tales of a crime against nature. Frankenstein's creation of the monster and the mariner's shooting of the albatross. The myth of Prometheus is also important. Prometheus in Greek mythology was a giant who stole the fire from the gods in order to give it to man. In so doing, he challenged the divine authority and freed man from God's power. He is a clear example of an overreacher, just like Dr. Frankenstein, who takes his place alongside Marlowe's Faustus and Milton's Saturn. The novel is told by different narrators. At first, Walton informs his sister, whose initials are the same as those of Mary Shelley, MS, that is, Margaret Saville. Then Frankenstein informs Walton, who informs his sister, and finally the monster informs Frankenstein, who informs Walton, who informs his sister. Thus, the whole novel has Walton's sister as the receiver, but present three different points of view. The form of the novel is epistolary. Perhaps the writer wanted to disguise her own voice as a woman by hiding behind three male narrators. The main themes of the novel are the quest for forbidden knowledge, which is present throughout, the overreacher in the characters of Walton and Dr. Frankenstein, the double, Dr. Frankenstein and the monster are two aspects of the same being, the penetration of nature's secrets, which is related to the theme of overreacher, the usurpation of the female role, since the creation of human beings become possible without the participation of women, and social prejudice through the figure of the monster as an outcast. The quest for forbidden knowledge is related also to Faustus, because Victor is playing God. But only God can create. Creating life is a penetration of nature's secrets, but he creates life by himself. And now let's see some curiosities. The novel resulted from a competition between Mary Percy B. Shelley, Lord Byron, and writer John Polidori to see who could write the best horror story. In southwestern Germany, there is a castle Frankestein which Mary Shelley may have visited and where she may have found inspiration for her novel. In the early 18th century, an alchemist named Johann Conrad Dippel is believed to have stolen corpses out of Castle Frankenstein's burial grounds and to have performed dissection in an attempt to discover the secrets of life. It is also said that he tried to reanimate bodies with magic potions. Frankenstein has inspired several films, starting with the silent Frankenstein in 1910 up to the most recent versions such as Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 1994, directed by Kenneth Branagh and Victor Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein is the last one in 2015. The earliest use of the term Frankenstein food to refer to genetically modified food was in 1989. Frankenfood followed in 1992. It was used for revolutionary culinary creations that mix up original and unexpected food combination and ingredients.